Is dairy from other animals a food for humans?
Oh, absolutely. I am a huge raw milk advocate. Good raw milk is one of the best things on the planet.
You've seen this firsthand, how other cultures are living, and they have vibrant health.
I literally just saw the healthiest people I have ever seen in my entire life. Their eyes were white, their teeth were white, their skin was flawless, they were lean, beautiful people, ear-to-ear smiles. And I just remember seeing like, oh my gosh, like these are the people that drink blood and milk every day?
Their health span could put ours to shame. I mean, they are not suffering from chronic diseases like we are here. We're on 4 or 5 medications at 20, 30 years old.
Get rid of all the industrial aniseed oils in your house, please. It is so incredibly important.
This might fly in the face of anybody listening.
Start to embrace high-quality animal fats again. Butter, ghee, lard, tallow, schmaltz, bacon grease. When somebody attacks our food or questions our food, we take it very, very personally.
The sourdough in the grocery store is not the same as long fermented sourdough we could make here at home with just a few simple ingredients.
Every loaf of bread from 8,600 years old until the mid-1800s was sour. Every loaf of bread, by default, it was sour. Most of the bread commercially available is not sourdough bread. There is no requirement for labeling sourdough bread anywhere in this country. There's only 2 countries in the world that have requirements, and we are not one of them. So if you go into a shop and it says sourdough bread, it's probably not. All you're doing is literally eating the equivalent of Wonder Bread.
Would you go as far as saying that any food out there can be made healthfully?
We can make any food out there healthier than it currently is.
Because processing isn't a bad thing, whereas ultra processing is different.
Almost all food processing prehistorically made food safer, more nutrient dense, and more bioavailable. Food processing today, most of it is for purposes like big companies making a lot of money or improving shelf life or being able to ship things around the world without them getting bruised. But the problem comes when those are the goals at the expense of safety, nutrient density, and bioavailability.
Dr. Bill Schindler is an internationally renowned archaeologist, primitive technologist, and chef. He founded and directs the Eastern Shore Food Lab with a mission to preserve and revive ancestral dietary approaches to create a nourishing, ethical, and sustainable food system. Not only is he an adjunct professor of archaeology at University College Dublin, but he is a co-star of the hit National Geographic Channel show, The Great Human Race. Dr. Schindler has written features for The Washington Post, The Atlantic, and The London Times, as well as he is also the author of the wildly popular book, Eat Like a Human. I'm pleased to introduce you to none other than Dr. Bill Schindler. I first got to start off by saying that I've read hundreds of books over the years. I graduated from Penn State with a degree in nutrition and dietetics. So nutrition is like my first love, right? And I've read a bunch of books over the past probably decade, 12 years, and I can count on one hand the amount of books that have really just shifted my paradigm. The first book that I really read on this topic of nutrition and kind of ancestral living was Deep Nutrition by Dr. Kate Shanahan, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Fantastic book.
But the second book that really just shifted my paradigm was yours, Eat Like a Human. This came out in 2021, correct?
What is it? Actually, 2022, I believe. But yeah, right around there.
Right around that time. And I remember reading this, and we're going to talk all about it in this interview. But like most people, we ask the question, what should we eat to have healthy, long lives and to avoid chronic disease and just live a high quality life? But very few of us are asking that question, how should we eat? And you break that down so well inside your book, Eat Like a Human. And when I first heard that in 2021, 2022, it completely just shifted my paradigm. Even though I went to school for nutrition and I read all these other books, nobody else was asking that question. And it's so simple, so fundamental. I couldn't believe nobody else was asking this question. And so I first want to ask you, what got you into this? What led you to write this book, and kind of what got you started?
Well, let me start first off by saying, we have to do it because we talked about it beforehand, and you brought up Penn State. So I went to Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I actually started as a nutrition major and lasted 1 semester. And this was in 1991, and I realized that it was actually right around the same time Penn State joined the Big Ten. I think that was like 93 or so. But I lasted 1 semester. I've talked about this on many podcasts, this battle with health and food that I've had for most of my life. And just like so many other people go into a profession or into a field because they want to solve a problem for themselves quite often. That's one of the main reasons I wanted to be a nutrition major, because I had all these issues, and I knew something was wrong. Like the way that it was being conveyed to me, the information about how a human should be eating in 1991 just seemed absolutely absurd. I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew that I had been doing everything that all the professors were telling me I should be doing, and I wasn't getting any better, and I wasn't getting any healthier. And we're going to dive, I'm sure, into a lot of these topics over the next hour or so. But I'll tell you the thing that was the switch, and I love. I'm so grateful that my book was meaningful to you, and I love books. I absolutely love books. I don't collect things, but I do collect signed books. For some reason, it's just such a meaningful thing to me, and I love to give shout out to books that were transformative for me as well. The book that switched my mind, that sent me on that path from going from what should we eat to how should we eat, is a book called The Artificial Ape. And it's a great book, and it really doesn't have much to do with food, but it has to do with the role of technology in our ancestral past. And what it really does is it humbles us as humans. It makes us absolutely understand that we are such useless creatures biologically, except for our brains, that we have to make tools to solve problems and perform tasks, to overcome our physical limitations and augment whatever strength or speed or sight or whatever it is we have, which is not as good as we think it is, and in order to overcome tasks. And it's simple things like steps to get into a building, or eyeglasses to be able to see that, most of us, even if you don't see them now, so many people have contacts, just to be able to see, to do these sorts of things. But when you get into a kitchen, just think, anybody listening to this, just think about, if you truly break it down, how many technologies you were engaged with to make your breakfast or to make your lunch. And even if you weren't doing them, somebody was engaged in those technologies. Everything starting from a plow or a knife all the way through to, the Vitamixes and mixers and all these other sorts of things, stovetops. And when I started to think about the role that technology played in food, it became very apparent to me that we would not be sitting here with the brains as big as we have now, the ability to have this conversation, the ability to create, podcasts and do these sorts of things. I mean, you're in Pennsylvania, I'm in Maryland, and have a conversation that is seamless right now, unless we started making tools to transform raw ingredients from our environment into something our body can very efficiently do something with. And in response to this, we fueled these massive brains and bodies that we now enjoy. That role of technology cannot be separated from our ancestral dietary past, and that ancestral dietary past cannot be separated from our evolutionary track that resulted in us today.
I love that, because I think people lose context of historical perspective, and you have this beautiful perspective of what humans have done in the past and have done for a very long period of time, millions of years, and only ever so recently, within maybe the past few hundred years, have we really just changed how we're living our lives. We made things more convenient, more comfortable, and I think people can get so science bound today, just bound to the science, that they lose context of historical past. And I think you need both. And that's what you really bring to the table, is this historical perspective so beautifully in your book. And we're going to talk about the technologies, because you mentioned that word a few times. And because I think people think of technology as our phones, our devices, like you mentioned. But technologies is really, a stone tool or a weapon of sorts. And I want to talk about that in a minute. But I think what's really unique about you in particular is that you have visited some of these cultures, these traditional culture tribes, like the Maasai, correct?
Absolutely. Well, we were the Samburu, but they're very similar to the Maasai, yes.
Right. You started out your book in the introduction with a story about you visiting this culture. Can you just talk about that? Because I think you've seen this firsthand, how other cultures are living, and they have vibrant health. And I think seeing and being there has such a lot of value to it. And you've been there. You've been there firsthand experiencing it. So can you talk about that story a little bit?
In fact, the picture that you're looking at right there is my son. We were with the Samburu, and in the cup he's got in his hand is a cup full of blood and milk. And since I have it right here, kinds of props. This is the arrow that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. This is what I traded for with the Samburu. Wow. I used to teach a class every semester to incoming freshmen at Washington College, and it was called Food, People, and the Planet. And one of the things that I did, and this is in response, have you ever seen the show Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmern?
I have not.
Okay, so it was a big show about, I don't know, 15 years ago. So Andrew Zimmern would travel around the world. He was the host of the show. It was on the Food Network, I think, or maybe Travel, I forget. But he would go to these places, and he would go with some traditional, interview some traditional group, and they'd have some, the title of the show was Bizarre Food, and he'd have this show some bizarre food that they're eating from our Western standards, right? This bizarre food. And he'd be like, this is a very bizarre food. These people are eating this really strange thing. I'm going to try some of it. And he's going to make a face, and then the show ends. Oh my God, that is such a lost opportunity. Meanwhile, we're sitting here eating McDonald's and all these other things. To me, that's the bizarre food. And it prompted me to start creating this particular course, which would, food is so intertwined with everything that we absolutely are as a human, that when somebody attacks our food or questions our food, we take it very, very personal. Because food to us is not just eating, and it's not just nutrition, and it's not just even pleasure. It's it's emotional, it's cultural, it's political, it has socioeconomic ties, it's traditional. All these things. It's religious for many of us. And if you attack our food or question our food, then we get very defensive, very, very defensive. So it's a very hard nut to crack. But all he was doing through this show was reinforcing, hey, the way you've been brought up eating with McDonald's and all this nonsense, this is good, and that's regular, and this is very, very weird. And what I wanted to do was something completely different. So at the beginning of this class, what I do is I identified a whole bunch of things that would fall in under his category of bizarre food from our Western standards. And every student was assigned one of these groups, in particular foodways. And then their job was to learn about it. And then by the end of their research and what they submitted and their presentation and their papers, they had to convince us that it made complete sense. Whether it's because of the climate they were in or something that they were facing or their economic situation or whatever it was, the resource base, make it so that flip it on its head, that looked normal, and what we're doing was bizarre. And that it was a great way to start off this class because it opened our minds to a lot of different things. But that has sort of been the impetus for a lot of the research we've done around the world, where we've said, okay, that does look really, really strange. Will I even eat that? But then if you go and you get in that, you immerse yourself in that context, you're living with a person or a family or a group, and understanding, making that food together, enjoying that food together, it's like this curtain opens up and this makes complete sense. And maybe what I'm doing is strange, and we can learn something from it. So one of the things, and this is why I opened the book with it, that I always wanted to do as an anthropologist, I've been, hearing about this particular practice quite a bit. There's two groups in the world that are nomadic pastoralists, which means they're not farmers, they're pastoralists, so they have animals, but they don't deal with animals the way that we deal with animals here, in the modern world today, where we just pen them in and keep them their whole life in this one square foot, several square feet. They actually let these animals roam and they follow them around. They're actually semi-nomadic. So half the year during the wet season, when there's lush vegetation and there's a lot of resources around for the animals to eat, they stay in one place. But during the dry season, when the forage for these animals, the vegetable material is so tough and dead and dry, they have to eat massive quantities of it to nourish their bodies. And when they eat massive amounts of it, there's no more left to where they are. The animals just take off and roam. And the men and the boys leave and follow these animals during the entire dry season, and then come back at the end of the dry season with the animals again. Well, these particular nomadic pastoralists, and primarily the groups known as the Maasai and the Samburu, are, who practice this type of subsistence. But one of the things that's really unique is they're not farmers and they're not really foragers. They eat almost no vegetation whatsoever. And they have these, and if I just said to you, okay, they don't eat many vegetables at all, really hardly any, and they have all these animals, you'd say, oh, okay, well, they're slaughtering the animals and butchering them and eating all this meat. And they don't. They actually very rarely eat meat as well. The mainstay of their diets is blood and milk. And again, to our Western standards, like, whoa, that's really, really strange. Why would they even do that? And maybe the milk, because milk is such a important part of our diet in Western world, that you can get that piece and understand it. But the blood part seems very strange. First off, blood is not really a part of most of our diets. And when we think about blood, we equate it to death. So we would think, oh, well, if they're drinking the blood from these animals, that means they're killing a whole bunch of animals. And that's not the case. They look at the blood the same way they look at the milk, as this renewable resource, this animal as a factory to take this tough vegetable material that we can't get any nutrition from and transform it into milk and transform it into blood. And this is exactly what we did. And it was amazing. And it was one of the most, I don't want to say difficult travels to get to them that we've ever accomplished. It took the most amount of days to get there. I mean, we were living in Ireland at the time. We flew from Ireland to London to South Africa because we were at a conference there. And then we flew to Kenya. And we got off the plane in Kenya, met friends of ours. We flew on this little tiny plane to this little village. We got in a car. We drove for a day, camped in the middle of nowhere, then drove for another day. And then the road, the dirt kind of path road thing we were on ended. We went into a dried riverbed and drove several miles up a dried riverbed just to get to this village and came up to this village. And there were several things that were really unique that I want to point out. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I think these are really important. Number one, we have worked with groups, everything from Inuits from Greenland down to Quechua Indians in Peru, all over the world. When we got out of we're in this dried riverbed, and some of the Samburu warriors were there, young men in their late teens, early 20s. There were about 3 or 4 of them standing there on the top of the river bank. So we got out of the cars or Land Rovers, and then I look up, and it was just like the perfect setting. The sun was behind them. They're standing there just regal looking. I mean, literally, they were the healthiest looking people I have ever seen in my life anywhere in the world. Their eyes were white. Their teeth were white. If you follow Weston Price, their teeth were exactly the kind of teeth that he described all over the world. Their skin was flawless. They were lean. They were muscular, but not like Arnold Schwarzenegger. They were muscular in that sort of Leonardo da Vinci sort of, David sort of way. Beautiful, beautiful people, ear-to-ear smiles. And I just remember seeing like, oh my gosh, like these are the people that drink blood and milk every day? Okay, whatever. So we get up and we follow them, and this is what happened. They pulled over one of their cows, and they tied a rope around its neck and tightened it a little bit, almost. And this was exactly, if you go to give blood or get blood work done, it was exactly the same thing, but it was done on a big cow around their neck as opposed to one around. So the same way they wrap around that rubber band on your arm, they did that around its neck, and then its jugular, really, really big. And they took this little tiny bow, it looked like a little kid's bow, with this arrow. So they shot it into the jugular. It goes in only about a half an inch and pops right back out. And literally, it's like a fountain of blood coming out. And they had this gourd, and they collected about 1 liter of the blood. And as soon as they got as much as they needed, they took the rope off its neck, picked up some dirt off the ground, threw it up into the wound, and it walked away. Literally, the only time that animal even made a motion that it knew something was going on was when they grabbed it. Like all the rest of it didn't even flinch. Walked away, and they had 1 liter of blood. They went to another cow and milked it and got about 1 liter of milk, mixed the two of them together. They stirred it, and the blood that coagulated on the stick, they actually fed to a dog, and the rest of it we all drank. And it sounds really, really strange. But first off, in that context, it was beautiful. And I can guarantee anybody listening to this who's thinking, oh my God, I would never do that. If you were there, I promise you would have done it. Everybody asked what it tastes like. Now, everybody in my family had a different take on it. Now, our youngest daughter was beside herself because the blood coming out of the cow's neck the way that it did looked like a cartoon, and like the cow was about to keel over dead. And she was very upset watching this.
She was a kid at this point.
Oh, she was really young. Yeah, she was beside herself. My son, who is right there, he's 19 now. He's probably 13 in that picture. He had it. My older daughter, Brianna, who was 15, had it. My wife had it. This is what they disagree a little bit with this, but this is what it tasted like a warm, irony, chocolatey milkshake. That's what
that sounds good to me.
Was delicious. And it was filling, and it was satiating. And here's the story. They do this every single day, twice a day in some cases. Now, not the same cow. And if you think it's weird, like when you give blood, we give almost the same amount of blood, and I'm 174 pounds. This cow was massive. They don't even touch that cow again for a couple of weeks. It's completely regenerated that blood. So they look at that blood and they go, when the men and the boys leave and they follow these animals around during the entire dry season, They only take with them this arrow. Well, not this one because I have it because I traded for it. But an arrow like that, a knife, and a gourd. That's it. They take nothing else. They don't even take containers for water. I mean, they get everything they need from these cows. They don't, and all that they eat, the entirety of that time, is blood and milk twice a day. When an animal dies, they will eat it, but they very rarely kill an animal. And if you think about this as this renewable resource, like we do, you don't kill dairy cows for meat very often because you eat them for the milk. Well, they don't kill these cows because they need them for the blood and the milk. I think it's a very beautiful system. What was really eye-opening to me was after we came back to the U.S. that following year, I was still teaching at Washington College, and I was engaged in a lot of conversations about food and food security and nutrition and all these sorts of things. And I remember being in a meeting here in Maryland, and somebody was talking about, that same question. How are we going to feed this growing population around the world? And, we got to do this, and maybe we need more GMO crops and all these other sorts of nonsensical conversations. And it hit me. I'm like, oh my God, like we're not even scratching the surface of possibilities here. Right. Like I literally just saw the healthiest people I have ever seen in my entire life. And the two mainstays of their diet, raw milk and blood, are impossible for me to get in this state. Like it's not even part of our conversation.
Right.
Like I can't legally get raw milk, and it's almost impossible for me to get fresh blood here. And we're having this conversation about GMO corn, and it's not even, it's insane. Now, I'm not suggesting, maybe I am, I'm not, that we all should be drinking blood and drinking milk. That's not the point. The point is when we have these conversations, and one of the things that I wanted to do with the book is stretch our brains, stretch our limits of what we're thinking about real food truly can be. And we're going to have to get to those places if we're going to solve any of the problems that we're facing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And taking a step back, I think anybody hearing this for the first time, like you mentioned, I mean, this can sound out there. It sounds weird. It sounds strange. But I mean, that's coming from when our food guide pyramid came out in 1992, which was a lot of the problems that I'm sure you and I both experienced when we were trying to follow the guidelines and the nutrition recommendations in college. And part of the reason, I mean, that's so far astray from what that culture and a lot of traditional culture tribes have been doing and what humans have been doing for a very long time. Food guide pyramid and my plate, it's based on whole grains, which we can talk about grains and how we can eat those healthfully coming up. Same with dairy and plants. And because that answers that question of how can we eat healthfully and how can we prepare our foods properly. But I mean, then we were told to eat meat sparingly and then fats at the tippy top of the pyramid. But you're seeing this culture that is truly thriving, healthy, that is probably living long lives, but their health span, it could put ours to shame. I mean, they are not suffering from chronic diseases like we are here. We're on 4 or 5 medications at 20, 30 years old, and then we are living lower quality lives, whereas this culture is living off a renewable resource, milk and blood, which is genius because you can get infinite amount of calories as long as that animal lives 15, 20 years, I'd imagine, for a cow in some cases. But you're not killing it. You can probably get hundreds of thousands, if not a million calories, and you're trying to share that one cow if you kill it for meat, and you're sharing that with the tribe, your family, but it's renewable in the sense that you can get milk and blood. And this could lead into the conversation of bacteria, and I want to talk about raw milk to come and how to safely consume dairy, leading into kind of what it means to eat like a human. And that's part of it. You touched on a very small part of it, is that how it means to eat like a human is not what we're doing in our culture today. And there's different components of that about how we evolved over time. And you mentioned technologies earlier. And so I really want to hit on this concept of technologies and what that means for you and our human species, because we're not talking about just our phones or the computer that we're on. Technology is simple as a rock, or that arrow you showed. And these are some of the earliest signs of technology that humans had throughout time. So can you touch on the technologies and then the kind of internal, external technologies that humans have versus other species?
Absolutely. So one thing I want everybody to understand is that we have literally outgrown our digestive tract. We are at a place now, humans have a body that is large enough and a brain that is large enough that has nutritional requirements that we cannot meet without a massive input of technology into our food. And I'm not talking about things like microwaves or people in lab coats making, high fructose corn syrup or anything like that. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is the moment that we created our first technology, and right now in the archaeological record, that is a stone tool that dates to 3.3 million years ago. That was the first technology ever created that we have access to, and it was used as a butchering tool. And just a quick little, that's 3.3 million years ago. The earliest evidence of butchering we have is 100,000 years earlier. We have the bones of an animal that have butchering marks on them that date to 3.4 million years ago. We just haven't found the tool that was used to do that yet. But again, we're talking, let's just say roughly 3.5 million years ago. I will, just because I saw it minutes before we got online, Nature, which is a fantastic publication, very, very scientific and very, very well peer-reviewed. A friend of mine who's at the Smithsonian, she's a fantastic archaeologist, Brianna Pogner, was a part of this study. They just found the earliest examples of our ancestors outside of Africa in Romania that date to 1.95 million years ago. Oh, wow. And the evidence for that is a butchered bone, a butchered tibia of a cervid. So a deer-like animal. Again and again and again, we're talking about very early technologies, animals in our diet, butchering marks, tools, all these things that show the value of animals in our prehistoric diets, but also tasks that are getting accomplished that we can't do with our fingernails and these teeth that we have. So the very first technology was a stone tool. It's called a Lemekwe tool used for butchering. And then we learn how to make different tools and different stone tool technologies through time. And then about 2 million years ago, we introduced fire and we introduced the ability to hunt. Which I think is the most transformative thing that we did in our past. And then we have technologies like fermentation and soaking and sprouting and things like nixtamalization and all of these things, all of these technologies we're creating that allow us to, the proper word is extrasomatically, so outside of our body, process a raw material that we truly have no business eating. Whether or not you're a vegan, vegetarian, carnivore, I don't care, pescatarian, I don't care what you are. Forget all the political pieces of all this. I don't care what you are. You cannot get the food that you need without technology.
Right.
If you are a carnivore, you can't get that meat without the technology needed to, at minimum, hunt that animal and cut it up. And most of us are probably cooking it as well. So, those are 3 incredibly important technologies. If you are a vegan or a vegetarian and you are eating bread, the massive amount of technology needed to plant, harvest, prepare the grains, to grind the grain, to clean the grains, to grind the grains, to sift the grains, to mix everything together, to put it in an oven and bake it. The input on these technologies is transformative. If you tried to go out into a field like a duck and harvest all these little grains, if you didn't starve yourself to death by eating all those raw grains because you couldn't get enough, if you were able to even get enough, you'd poison yourself to death. You need a massive input of technology. So no matter what your dietary path is, understand that we need technologies, and this is what our ancestors did, to perform 3 very important functions: to access the most nutrient-dense, bioavailable ingredients possible, take them, make them safe, and then make them as nourishing as they can be, because our digestive tracts can't handle them. We essentially get nutrition from the environment in 2 different ways. One, and the Maasai and the Samburu were great examples of this, we take animals who are perfectly biologically designed to eat whatever their diet is and take these raw materials that are inaccessible to us, put them through their digestive tract that are designed to safely and efficiently derive nutrition from them, put them through their digestive tract, and then transform that into something that we can derive nutrition from. So it turns into meat and fat and blood and organ, brains and all these things, and then we can eat that. Or the milk, right? Or the blood.
It's amazing.
Or the other thing we can do is mimic what happens inside of their bodies, outside of our bodies, and take these raw materials and then consume them after they've been made safer or not. So a really quick example is a cow is perfectly designed to eat really tough vegetable materials, right? So it has a corrugated palate on the roof of its mouth and these really big teeth, and the way that they chew like this allows them to take these tough vegetable materials and mechanically break them down. And then when they swallow it, it goes into the 4th chamber of their stomach called a rumen. And the rumen is a fermentation chamber. And after they've mechanically broken it down a bit, it goes into a rumen, it ferments, and then they throw up their food back into their mouth, and they chew it up some more, and then they swallow it, it goes back into the rumen, and it ferments some more, it goes back and forth and back and forth. And then finally, when it's ready, it goes into the rest of their digestive tract. Yeah. If we tried to eat that same food, we could never access the nutrients in it, and we would die of malnutrition. So we can either eat the cow or the milk or the blood after it's done that, or we can take tough vegetable materials, stick them in a fermentation crock with a little bit of salt, and allow it to ferment, and then we can more readily access the nutrients that have been made safer and more available to us in there. So those technologies are crucial in order to transform raw materials into something our bodies can actually derive nourishment from.
Yeah, I hope people are hearing this, because that right there, that description is the premise of your book, How Should I Eat? Answering that question, because as you explained, humans are amazing that we are probably one of the only species that has learned how to develop these external technologies, is what you would call them, because all these other species have that technology built in, and they are digesting that food, they are fermenting that food, whereas humans have invented these technologies outside of our bodies that can ferment the food outside. And I hear often from plant-based advocates, vegans, vegetarians, that humans just aren't designed to eat meat. We don't have the sharp canines. Our digestive tracts aren't like carnivores. But as you would have said in your book, and you can talk more about this if you'd like, we develop these external technologies. We don't need the sharp canines because we're not running at fast speeds. I mean, Usain Bolt runs how fast? Not as fast as a cheetah or a lion. We're not taking down a prey with our teeth. We've developed these tools and weapons, as you would call them in your book here, the atlatl or the bow and arrow further on down the timeline, and more recently guns, right? That's a form of a technology that we recently invented. And so can you kind of speak to that a little bit, how maybe our internal digestive systems are or aren't designed to eat meat or plants, but we've really developed the external technologies to be able to digest meat like that?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes. And I think it's not irrelevant. Our digestive tract's ability and inability, I don't want to go so far as to say it's irrelevant to what we eat, but at some level it almost is. We can, again, the only food that we are perfectly designed to consume as humans, the only food we're perfectly designed to consume is milk from our mothers when we're infants. And then when we get weaned off of our mothers, I mean, we're mammals. I mean, that is literally the definition of being a mammal. When we, just like all other mammals, get weaned off of our mothers, a lot of the enzymes that we produce to efficiently and safely derive nutrition from our mother's milk, we stop making them, or they change a little bit, or they appear at lower levels inside of our bodies. So then we're left, once we're weaned, we're left literally defenseless. Now, back in the day, like 3.5 million years ago, our bodies were small enough and our brains were small enough for us to do fine eating a little bit of hyperlocal, hyper-seasonal wild plants and a whole bunch of insects, and we could do fine. But when we started creating these technologies, again, stone tools to allow us to scavenge meat from animals that were killed by something else and get the meat in the marrow, and then fire to cook our food, and hunting technologies to take our own animals down. And we did that, by the way, our brain, there's the largest jump in body and brain size when we start hunting, because we have first access to the animal, and we not only get the meat that's left over, but also the blood, the fat, and the organs. We have first access to any part of that animal. And we use fermentation to unlock the nutrients in plants. And we nixtamalize maize to get the niacin out of the maize. And we do all these amazing things. Every time we take one of these steps, we're nourishing these growing bodies and brains, but we're also making our growing bodies and brains dependent on those technologies. Because if you rip those technologies away, we no longer have access to that incredibly high-quality, bioavailable nutrition. I am by no means an anti-plant person.
Right.
I do eat plants. I enjoy plants. I absolutely, the other night, I love Brussels sprouts. I just love the taste of Brussels sprouts. But we have to really get over this sort of political conversation, it's all plant or no plant sort of conversation, if we're really going to get at the heart of, here we are as modern humans. Many of us enjoy plants. Many of us have access to plants in our diets. Many of us aren't at a place where we'd even consider not eating plants, right? So if we're going to eat a really healthy diet and meet all of our cultural and religious and emotional needs, as well as our nutritional needs, what do we do? Just for a second, let's categorize animals and plants in our diets It's two different things. And look at the role of technology in both getting the actual resource and then preparing that resource and get it ready for our bodies, because they're literally polar opposites. To get an animal, to actually capture an animal, to hunt or fish or trap an animal requires a massive amount of technology. There are things that we can jump on and catch, yes. But the reality is we need atlatls, bows and arrows, boomerangs, traps, fishing nets, fishing hooks, all sorts of things, guns, like you mentioned, to overcome our physical limitations and access an animal, especially an animal of any real size or speed. Mm-hmm. Once we have that animal, we need almost no technology other than a sharp edge. We just literally have to cut that animal open. The blood, the fat, and the organs are incredibly bioavailable as they are. You do not need to cook them. Our body doesn't have to work any harder to access the nutrients in it in a raw state than if it's made into pate, right?
They don't have defense chemicals like plants might.
Right, they don't have anything like that at all. Yeah. The meat, there is some suggestions that a little bit of processing of the meat helps our body on a very minute scale access the nutrients inside of like a big huge hunk of red raw meat. Yeah, it's incredibly nourishing. It's more nutrient dense than any plant on the planet. Right. But if you just had that as a human and had to use these teeth with no technologies and just our digestive tract to access the nutrients in it, our bodies have to work a little bit to do it. If we ground it up and cooked it just a little bit, our body would work less hard to get those same nutrients. But again, it's not once we have that animal, we're looking at a pile of the most safe, nutrient-dense, bioavailable nutrition possible. Tons of technological input to get it, very little to prepare it. Plants are the opposite. Now, this is pre-agriculture. Like when we start agriculture and plows, and that's a different thing. But as hunter-gatherers, to access the plants requires almost no technology whatsoever. Maybe a digging stick to get at some reach, maybe a little sharp edge to cut some things off, but you're collectively foraging everywhere. Getting the resources doesn't require a lot of technology. The technological input comes with taking this incredibly toxic thing and transforming it into something that our body can safely use. And just as importantly, plants do have nutrition in them, but most of the time that nutrition is locked up in a way that without help, our body can't access that nutrition. So that's where things like fermentation, technologies like that play a very large role.
And this might fly in the face of anybody listening, because we hear plant-based diet is the way to go. It leads to less chronic disease. But the way we're eating foods here in America and civilized societies is completely different than how humans have really evolved to eat food. I mean, the way we're eating foods, you go up and down any aisle in the grocery store and they're ultra processed is one thing. Highly, highly, highly processed, completely different than processing of food, because processing isn't a bad thing. Like, as you were alluding to, processing is just cutting meat off the bone or making a soup, cooking using fire, whereas ultra processing is different. Are you able to speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. And this was a huge thing in my head. I mentioned it in the book briefly. So I'll give you the quick story again. I was teaching at Washington College this particular semester. I had, I usually taught 3 classes a semester, and I'm an archaeologist by training, so most of my classes are like rooted in the deep, deep, deep past. But this particular semester, 2 of the classes were archaeological, and one was more of a cultural anthropology class, and that had a more modern, I forget exactly what the classes were, but I just remember one was a lot about ancestral diets, and one was about things happening today in the modern world. And I had this female student in both of those classes. And about a month into the semester, she comes up to me, she goes, "Professor Schindler, listen, I got a question for you. I don't understand it." I said, "What?" I said, and it was about exactly what you said. "You keep saying the word food processing over and over and over again. And in the class about prehistoric diets, you get super excited and you talk about it, you get all energized. And when you say food processing in the modern class, it looks like somebody just ran over your dog and you're super upset. Like, what is the difference?" And I looked at her, and there's so many things in our brains that we separate. But if somebody asked you, like, "Oh, I can't explain it. I can't define it. I can't whatever." And this is one of those moments. I don't know. I know there's a difference. Like it's the basis of so much of what I do, but I was never taken to task to try to figure it out. And it took me a couple weeks to actually get an answer for it. And I did what all good professors are supposed to do. They said, "I will get back to you." I'll get back to you. And I did. So this is what I landed on, and I think it's a very good way to separate it. I wish there were, and this is a huge problem in language where you have the same word with two completely separate meanings.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, for us, one of the issues with us overcoming fat, and it's not the same issue in other languages, but dietary fat that we eat, and fat that is in our waist is the same word. Mm-hmm. So it's very, it's hard for us to separate in our heads, like I'm eating this fat and it's not going to go on my hips right away, right? I wish there were separate words for food processing, but here's what I landed on. Almost all food processing prehistorically made food safer, more nutrient dense, and more bioavailable. Incredibly positive things. And it also improved flavor and texture and all these things, but it accomplished one or all three of those major things. Food processing today, most of it is for purposes like big companies making a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. Or improving shelf life, or being able to ship things around the world without them getting bruised, right? This is what food get us addicted to food, or the list can go on and on. And not necessarily all of those things are bad, right? The ability to improve shelf life, that's not necessarily a bad thing in itself. But the problem comes when those are the goals at the expense of safety, nutrient density, and bioavailability. Yeah. So food processing today, in most cases, is for things that have no benefit to the consumer and, in fact, destroy safety, nutrient density, and bioavailability.
Right. Like, so for example, I mean, the sourdough in the grocery store is not the same as long fermented sourdough we could make here at home with just a few simple ingredients. Can you kind of use that as an example and talk about
absolutely that? And I will tell you, I started to think about this a couple minutes ago with another thing that you were saying. The best thing that we can do, I'm convinced, as consumers. I mean, we went from gatherers to scavenger gatherers to hunter gatherers, which is all amazing things. Every one of these steps has increased nutrient density, bioavailability in our diets. Our bodies responded, our huge bodies, huge brains, fantastic. And then about 12,000 years ago or so with the agricultural revolution, we turned into food producers, right? We were making food as opposed to doing, and then since the 1700s, we've been food consumers. I mean, most of us are consumers. These last two steps, food producers and food consumers, one of the biggest issues that it caused was it took so many of us away from getting our food and processing our food. It created this incredibly long food chain where now we're at a place where we have to have a podcast to talk about what we should eat. I mean, we would have never needed to have a podcast 5,000 years ago because nobody had these questions about their food. They were so intricately connected to everything about their environment, their food, their bodies, how they're, all of this. Nothing was hidden from them. But now we have to ask questions, and now we have, a lot of people have control over us.
So far removed.
So far removed. Yeah. So the number one thing that we can do to improve our own health and the health of our families and our communities is start removing links from our food chain. I mean, that's it. In whatever way. And I think that's a very powerful thing to say because for everybody, that's something a little bit different, but just remove it, get a little bit closer. And one of the most powerful things to me is and it doesn't have to be every day. You don't have to go all the way, all of a sudden from this modern food consumer and you buy everything at BJ's and Costco and then all of a sudden, put a loincloth on and run into the woods and try to become a hunter-gatherer for the rest of your life. It's not going to work, and it's not realistic. But if you even go hunting once a year, or fishing once a year, or if you're a vegetarian, go foraging once a year or once a season, that reconnection that happens through such a powerful activity is limitless. I mean, it is so incredibly empowering. From a home perspective, if you start cooking more from scratch, a lot of this advertising and marketing, you start to become immune to it, right? Because you know how real food is made. And the reason I bring all that up is because you just mentioned sourdough. If one of the most bastardized foods in our grocery store right now is sourdough, and another one is cheese. And two of my favorite classes to teach here are sourdough bread and cheese making. And the reason is, we hold these classes, and we have people here. We do all go through all the different steps and show everybody how to make cheese completely from scratch in their home, and how to make sourdough bread completely from scratch in their home. And you know what? In every class, everybody goes home thinking they're going to do it. Almost everybody makes a loaf or two. Some of them make bread for the rest of their lives. We hope they will, and it looks like they're going to, or cheese. And then some of them never do it again. But they at least know how to buy bread and buy cheese because they know how it's supposed to be made. Very quickly with the bread, let me just give a real quick takeaway, because most of the bread commercially available is not sourdough bread. There is no requirement for labeling sourdough bread anywhere in this country. There's only 2 countries in the world that have requirements, and we are not one of them. So if you go into a shop and it says sourdough bread, it's probably not. If you go to a restaurant and it says, oh, this burger's coming on a sourdough bun, or this sandwich is coming on sourdough bread, it's probably not. This is how you can tell. There is, and sourdough bakers, we have a sourdough bakery downstairs as a part of our restaurant, and I can vouch for this. Most sourdough bakers hate the term sourdough because the public thinks that means the bread has to taste sour. It doesn't. Everything made with grains in here, whether it's bread, whether it's our gluten-free bread, whether it's our croissants and other pastries, all of our flour has been put through a traditional, long, wild, slow fermentation. And I can tell you, when we want some of our older age sorts of sourdough to taste slightly sour, we do. Our croissants don't taste sour at all, and we do that on purpose. So it doesn't have to taste sour. But what makes sourdough bread is traditional sourdough bread has 2 fermentations happening side by side. One is a yeast fermentation and one is a bacterial fermentation. The yeast fermentation eats available sugars and produces alcohol and carbon dioxide. The alcohol is very minimal in bread and it burns off when you bake it anyhow. The carbon dioxide of it makes it rise. Even though we love to use hyperlocal wild yeast that's here in Chestertown, Maryland, which we do, the reality of what that yeast is doing to the bread is exactly the same as if we took Fleischmann's yeast off of a grocery store shelf and put it in. It's just making the bread rise. The power comes from the other fermentation, from the wild bacteria, which is lacking in almost all other breads. That bacterial fermentation does several things. It produces lactic acid through fermentation, which lowers the pH, which puts it in a very safe zone for all the good microbes that are very beneficial to us. As that pH gets lower, when it gets below 4.6, it activates an enzyme that starts cutting up the gluten strands, which is awesome, especially if you have a gluten intolerance. Yeah. It makes it more easily digestible. It helps mitigate issues with things like anti-nutrients like phytic acid and lectins and all sorts of other things. It helps make those grains incredibly safe and starts breaking them down to pre-digest them to allow us to access nutrients in that bread more easily. Our bodies have to work less hard. It also, because of both of those fermentations, and it's eating all these available sugars, it lowers the glycemic index of the bread. So there's all these incredible benefits, and the bacterial fermentation are responsible for the aroma and for the flavor of the bread. So win-win all the way around. The yeast is literally only making it rise. That's all that it's doing. So what the modern industrial food system has done is they capitalize on this misinterpretation by the general public that sourdough bread is supposed to taste sour. They just in most cases, make a regular yeasted bread and add something sour to it. Lactic acid, citric acid, or acetic acid, or vinegar, which is acetic acid. So if you turn over the label on the bread, and I don't care if you've walked all the way from the bread aisle in the grocery store and you went to the deli aisle where they have the nice brown bags and the bread is in rounds and it's twice the price and it has nice, colors on it and the labeling, turn it over. If it says yeast, it probably isn't sourdough, but there are some sourdough bakers that do add yeast, but it probably isn't sourdough if it says yeast. The dead giveaway is if it says lactic acid, citric acid, or acetic acid, or vinegar. They're mimicking what your false expectation of what sourdough is supposed to taste like by adding those things in. And all you're doing is literally eating the equivalent of Wonder Bread with a little bit of sourness. So what you should do, number one, sourdough bread is incredibly easy to make at home. Yes. And I can promise you that you can make at home something better that you can get at almost anywhere. And it's definitely, even if it looks terrible, it's healthier than anything you're going to get anywhere else. Or go to somewhere where you actually know the baker or know somebody that knows the baker and ask them, what they're doing. Real sourdough bread is a powerful thing. I hardly eat any bread whatsoever, but when I do, it is always sourdough. We have a massive amount of gluten intolerant customers that are fine on our bread, and we just identified our 8th celiac customer that's fine on our bread. We have several celiac customers that are not fine on our bread, but I know for sure that there are 8 documented customers celiac that are fine on our bread.
Yeah, there was a study that I often reference. I can't remember what journal it was publicized in. They had a few different types of breads, and one of them was a long fermented sourdough bread. And the study was with celiac patients, and all of them did fine. They didn't have any of the antibodies when they had the sourdough bread, but when they had like the regular just white bread in the grocery store, yeah, they all reacted to it. But sourdough is like, to kind of bring that full circle, you explained it perfectly. I have a lot of friends and family members that hear about sourdough because it's a current fad or trend, but that's what our ancestors have been doing. That's one of the external, technologies that humans have been doing for tens of thousands of years because of, learning how to grow the grains and everything. But that's what humans have been doing for a very long time. But because of big food, we've learned to just make everything convenient and just to get higher margins and yield and profit. But I have friends and family that will go to the grocery store, see sourdough, and they think that's healthier, but companies are trying to take advantage of us and use just terms that are current trends or fad. But like you mentioned, it's super easy to make. I know my wife and I have been making sourdough thanks to you for the past, 3 or 4 years now. It's just 3 ingredients. I mean, it's water, flour, and salt. And then because we have a good starter, that's the yeast, that's the bacteria that's fermenting the sourdough, and it tastes amazing, tastes incredible. We give it to friends and family and they love it, and we have no issues. I don't bloat with that. But if I go to the grocery store and I have, whatever from my friends and family's house, the random breads, yeah, I'm going to get bloated, probably have digestive issues because we don't have that internal technology, as you would describe it, to break down those grains. But fermenting that outside of our bodies helps to break that down for us so we can eat that sourdough and give it all the benefits that you just laid out.
Absolutely. And I'll say the oldest loaf of bread we currently have seen archaeologically dates to about 8,600 years old. And every loaf of bread from 8,600 years old until the mid-1800s was sourdough. Every loaf of bread. By default, it was sourdough. And then when so many people love Louis Pasteur, I'm not a fan, but the ability to then isolate yeast in a lab and replicate it in a lab, that was the beginning of taking away that symbiotic relationship of the two fermentations, the bacteria and yeast fermentation happening side by side to do everything we need to do to make this incredible loaf of bread, separating it and just looking for the rising, with the yeast. I will also say, for anybody who does drink, beer probably started a little bit before bread, and all beer up until the mid-1800s, every glass of beer or mug of beer, clay vessel of beer, gourd of beer, whatever it was you're drinking 1,000 years ago, every bit of beer was a sour beer until the mid-1800s as well.
Wow. So did that beer have health benefits to it, or?
I'm starting to talk. So we have, what we're doing downstairs at the restaurant is we're trying to make familiar food as nourishing as it can possibly be.
Right.
And transcend different dietary approaches. Just make sure whether you're coming, no matter what it is you're doing, you're coming in here and eating, and whether you're a kid or an adult or a carnivore or vegetarian, whatever, you're coming in and you have access to food that has been put through all the traditional processes necessary to make it as safe and nourishing as it can be.
Yeah.
With that said, we also recognize that alcohol is a part of people's lives. Yeah. And so what we're doing with the alcohols, we have very strict standards on what we're doing with the alcohol. So for instance, we only serve sour beers, true sour beers. Mm-hmm. I am confident because a real sour beer, I'm not talking about, they have these like silly things now. They have these lactose, creamsicle sour beer. I'm not talking about that kind of nonsense, but a true sour beer, especially a wild fermented sour beer, the kind of stuff coming out of like Russian River in California, the real true sour beers have been put through the same bacterial fermentation process that sourdough bread is put through as well. I'm confident, and I know for myself, my I don't have the actual data for it, but I know that my body reacts to the sour beer same way or doesn't react to the sour beer the same way my body doesn't react to sourdough bread. Whereas if I just downed a beer or ate a piece of Wonder Bread, we only serve sour beers. The alcohol, we're starting a bar program. In fact, as soon as we get done today, I'm making vermouth. Wow. Our bar program is the hard alcohol is only coming from, it's 100% organic. The alcohol itself, the base, from Maryland and from Maryland grains, regeneratively grown Maryland grains. And we're adding all the mix-ins. We're making all the mix-ins. One of the worst things you can do if you're worried about all sorts of artificial ingredients and nasty sugars is order a mixed drink at a restaurant somewhere, because it's terrible. Not whiskey that's the issue. It's all the other nonsense that goes into it to make the drink. And almost every single mixed drink is incredibly sweet with nasty things in it. Yeah. And then finally, wine-wise, what we're doing now is we're using 100% spontaneous wild fermented wine from the Republic of Georgia, which is where wine first started about 8,000 years ago. It's ancestral grapes fermented in the ground in clay corvies, no additives. I mean, this stuff is really wine. And again, there's a lot of conversations we can have about alcohol, whether or not we should or shouldn't have it, how many glasses a day should we have, or a week or a month or whatever. And those are all really good conversations. But it all comes down to, are we having the same conversation? Because in this country, you can have, I don't care if it's a $350 bottle of wine from the Rhone Valley of wherever, you can have set up to 76 additives and not put it on the label. 76 additives in one glass of wine and not put it on the label. So are you talking about that wine, or are you talking about the wine that kind of wine some of our ancestors have been drinking for 8,000 years? Two completely different foods.
Yeah, and this really speaks to the fact, to answer your question that you propose at the beginning of your book, Eat Like a Human, how should I eat? Would you go as far as saying that any food out there can be made healthfully? Take plants, animals, dairy, anything out there, beer and alcohol even we're talking about, can we turn it into, I don't want to say a health food, but would you go as far as saying something like that you can make any food a healthier version of any food?
Okay. I didn't want to pump the answer. So yes, what I was thinking as you talk, I would go as far as to say we can make any food out there healthier than it currently is. And when I say healthier, I mean, again, it is safer, more nutrient dense, and more bioavailable. Any food possible, we can absolutely do it. And when we do, a whole new set of rules apply to that food than what we've been dealing with. So a great example, I think, when we started the restaurant here, all my wife and I wanted to do was create a restaurant that we would be happy to bring our family to and let the kids order anything on the menu and not worry about it.
I love that.
I mean, it's that simple. There's very few places in the world we feel that way about. So there's a lot of things on the menu here because we're trying to reach everybody where they are. Now, for me, pizza is an example of a food that in almost all cases is this terrible, terrible junk food. Now, we only make pizza here once a week because it takes us all week to make it. We're making everything from scratch. But, you think about a tradition, a modern fast food pizza and all the nonsense that goes into it. Or this is what our pizza is. We have a wild fermented sourdough crust that's made actually with the absolute best pizza flour on the planet. That's fermented for actually in and out of the refrigerator, but for 3 full days before we even use it. It's in a wood-fired oven. We make all the cheese from local milk. We make all the pepperoni and sausage from local pigs. When we pull that pizza out of the oven, what I'm giving to you is something that I don't know if I would go as far as to call it a health food, but it'd be damn close to a health food. And maybe, depending on your dietary take, maybe it is a health food. Yeah. And you put that next to another pizza, it's a completely different thing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've been trying to get across to my audience and family and friends is that you can still have your pizza and you don't have to have the headaches, the digestive issues when you do. You can still have your alcohol. How can we slowly start to switch some of these things around to prepare your food a little bit differently and just check the ingredients and learn how to traditionally prepare using fermentation or soaking? Let's circle back a little bit because you did mention earlier that kind of the this concept of the expensive tissue hypothesis a little bit. We developed shorter digestive tracts and larger brains, but you also made it a point to mention that it wasn't necessarily the scavenging that made us a human that we are today, but it was having that first access to the rest of the animal. Because chapter 3 in your book is titled More Animal, Less Meat. I really like that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Australopithecus afarensis, about 3.5 million years ago. These are the ones that we think were making the first stone tool. So they are the ones responsible for introducing meat into our diet as scavengers.
Is that Lucy, the famous?
This one actually is Lucy, but yes, man, very good. Okay. So I'm showing you the back because I want you to look at the size of the skull. Australopithecus afarensis, about 3.5 million years ago. Homo habilis at about 2.5 million years ago. So introducing meat into the diet, and this is 1 million years later. Not a massive amount of change in
about the same.
And height, maybe about like that, a little bit different. Not much at all. 1 million years worth of difference. Now let's fast forward 2.5 million years ago and 2 million years ago.
Wow.
Scavengers eating some meat, hunters eating the entire animal. So that is a massive jump in brain size. And then if I lifted this up to equate, body size would be about that different. So we're talking about a massive amount of a massive increase in nutritional needs to fuel this brain and this body from this to this.
Wow. So what took a million or a couple of million years of starting to eat meat, our brains, I'll make that distinction, meat, scavengers, our brain size didn't grow that much, but within just a shorter amount of time, a few 100,000 years, all of a sudden our brain size skyrocketed.
Skyrockets, almost modern proportions. Now I will say the two major technological innovations that played a role at some level were the introduction of fire and the introduction of the entire animal. Mm-hmm. I'll say the fire thing, while it sounds very important, and cooking is incredibly important in our modern diet. I'm cooking when I say cook, I mean like using heat to cook, because we use cooking for so many different things.
Right.
Using heat, using a fire is transformative, but it's mostly transformative in the plant world. You do not need it with animals. So the input of heat into, the introduction of fire into our ancestral past at about 2 million years ago, I think was more important for increasing the daylight so we could do tasks even when it was dark, social interactions and that sort of thing. At that moment was even more important than it was for food, because we were getting so much incredible nutrition from animals. That introduction of hunting made all the difference.
So in the archaeological records, did our brain size start to develop, start to skyrocket before the discovery of fire in humans? Is that debatable, or?
It's really, really hard to tell, because we do not have a direct example of fire at 2 million years ago. We don't. The earliest example, we have the direct example of hunting at that time period. We don't have the direct evidence for fire then. And when I say direct evidence for fire, I mean literally we found the place that the fire was burning.
Right.
For a lot of reasons. One is, I don't think the fires at that time are very ephemeral. It's more like a campfire. Now think about it. If you went out, you went camping with your friends, you had a fire that night, maybe even cooked some hot dogs or whatever, right? Marshmallows, and then put it out the next day. And 1 million years later, we're looking for the evidence of that fire. Yeah. I mean, it's very rare that it would last. That a fire of that size, or small size, would last. But we do have direct evidence for fire at about 1 million years ago. And one of the things that leads me to truly believe that we had fire 2 million years ago, or right around that time period, is because that is the earliest evidence we have of our ancestors moving out of Africa into northern latitudes. And you absolutely need fire for warmth, because not only are you moving into northern latitudes, but it's the beginning of the last ice age. They're literally moving north at the beginning of the last ice age. They cannot do it without fire. So it isn't direct evidence, but I'm confident there was control of fire at that point.
Yeah. So as hunters, moving from scavengers to hunters, we had first access to everything at this point, the entire animal. Can you kind of speak to the fact of why having access to beef organs in particular is so valuable to the human diet? We're not eating liver and heart and pancreas, spleen, kidney. We're not eating any of these foods anymore. And blood, as you mentioned earlier. Can you kind of speak to why that's so valuable for human health?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will make even the suggestion that not only is it valuable to us from a nutritional perspective, but that sort of an approach to eating animals is a lot more sustainable and is a lot more ethical, and it's also a lot more economical than the way that we approach animals today. And I'll give you a very quick example. So about 13 years ago or so, I did this study with a biologist at Washington College and also a senior who was working on her senior thesis. And we were trying to see how much food was left behind by an average deer hunter. And so what we did was we took 13 deer, different ages, males and females, weighed them, and took them completely apart. And when I say completely apart, I mean we took every bit of marrow out of every bone. We weighed the testicles, the eyeballs, I mean everything. We took everything and weighed it all and found the caloric equivalents of all of them. And then we took all the meat. And this is an average size white-tailed deer, right? So think about it in a minute. We start talking about things like pigs and cows that are in our diet today, right? We took all the meat that a typical hunter would keep, which, by the way, will really reflect the same sorts of cuts of meat from pigs and cows anyhow. We butcher our deer today in a very similar way that we butcher our cows, and we keep the loins and we keep the... We put all that meat aside and took everything else that a typical hunter either leaves in the field or throws away after they're done butchering their animals, that sort of thing. Took everything else and figured out the caloric equivalents of that and how much food that represented. And what we found was, and we took the two extremes, a couch potato and an Olympic athlete, and said, okay, how much food, how many days worth of food is left behind, is not used by an average hunter? And it was 13 to 31 days worth of calories. 13 to 31 days worth of calories. Now, this was we were doing this study in response to several different things that were in the literature at the time. And just to sort of equate it back to those of us who just get our meat from the grocery store or at a farmer's market, an average hunter that does a good job keeps about 50% of a deer by weight. That ends up getting packaged up and put in the freezer. 50% of a cow in this country typically makes it to the grocery store shelves, and 55% of a pig typically makes it to the grocery store shelves.
Terrible.
The part that's left behind represents by weight half of the animal, just about. But if you look from a nutritional perspective, it is well more than half. So even though it's half by weight, not only are we talking about more nutrient-dense food and bioavailable, but the diversity of nutrients that are in the blood, the fat, the organs is so much richer than what's just in the meat. And this is not an anti-meat conversation. Yeah. It is hey, let's get back to really what should we be doing? If you're, and this is one of I love so many things about the carnivore approach. I love it because it automatically gets rid of plant toxins out of your diet. Mm-hmm. It automatically ensures that you're eating only high-quality saturated animal fats. I mean, it ensures that you're eating one of the most nutrient-dense bioavailable foods on the planet, meat. I love every bit of that. But what I think it's missing is if you go from, modern Homo sapien today and I want to eat like my ancestors, and you go to just eating meat, you're going to the scavenger place. Like, you've gone back way too far. Like, stop. Go to the place where our brains jump in massive size and our bodies jump in massive size, where they were using the entire animal. And when you do that, you're not only eating this incredibly nourishing diet, but when an animal dies to nourish you and your family, you're eating like 90-something% of that animal, not 50% of that animal. From an ethical and sustainability perspective, it's a win-win. And from an economic perspective, the parts, I love ribeye, but my God, ribeye, the price of ribeye is out of
insane.
The price of liver is a completely different animal, right?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned all those points, the nutritional aspect, the kind of just making sure you're honoring that animal. And in a world of food scarcity, we don't have food scarcity in the United States. We can go any street corner and get fast food. We have calorie surplus. We're overfed, but we're undernourished because we're not including a lot of these traditionally prepared foods and such. But in a world of food scarcity for our ancestors, it wouldn't have made sense for them to only consume 50% of the animal and throw away the rest. I mean, you look at Native Americans that were in North America, they had hundreds, if not thousands, of uses for the entire animal. The bones made tools, shelter. The bison hides made shelter. So, I mean, I love that approach that you're honoring the entire animal. But in today's world, I mean, yeah, the carnivore approach, they're just eating the ribeyes and the burgers, but they're really not eating the organs anymore. And that's, as you mentioned, the most micronutrient dense part of the animal that helped develop our big brains and make us the apex predator. I mean, that's why we're at the top of the food chain, I would imagine, because we're hunting and having access to the entire animal.
Absolutely. And I'll say, so if you are have a very animal-based diet, the number one thing I'd recommend is to make sure you're getting enough fat, because it's too easy to still live back in that 1970s, 1980s anti-fat sort of thing that was ground into me for so long. And just like, oh, if I'm going to eat this and I'm eating my chicken breast and I'm cutting off the fat off my steak, make sure you're getting enough fat. That is incredibly important, number one. But the second thing is, once you're comfortable with that, start introducing the other parts of that animal for all the reason I mentioned. But here's the problem. We are so disconnected, so many of us, from, how big is that liver and what does that represent in that huge cow or that larger pig? The question that I get all the time is, well, okay, I get benefit of liver. It's fabulous. How much should I eat? That's a good question. You've been eating nothing but the meat your entire life, but now you want to introduce the liver. And the problem is, we go to the grocery store and these things are taken apart for us, right? We can go in the grocery store and just buy ribeye. We can go in the grocery store and just buy chicken breast. And we're left wondering, okay, if I want to be more ancestrally appropriate in my diet, how much of this and this do I start to include? Because for just as weird as it is to go into the grocery store and buy nothing but chicken breast, we could go to the grocery store and buy nothing but chicken liver and still have that same question. So what I've landed on here, and I think this makes sense, and it's at least a good foundational approach. If you asked any hunter-gatherer who just was dragging an animal, he just killed an animal, is dragging it back into camp, and you said, hey, how much liver should you eat? He's going to look at you and say, he or she, I don't really understand what you're asking me. I'm going to eat that liver and that heart and those kidneys and the spleen and the blood and the fat and all the meat, and then I'm going to go get another animal. I don't understand. What are you asking? Like, how much liver should I eat? That much liver I should eat. So what we've done here at the restaurant, we do at home, is I figured out, and the numbers are actually in the book. I figured out the amount I took a typical beef cow and said, okay, of the parts that I can easily, legally get from a butcher, liver, heart, kidney, fat, and meat. What are the percentages in an average beef cow? And when we do our ancestral burger blend here, when we do our ancestral hot dogs here, when we do our chili here, we put that in at that percentage, because that's what I'm not thinking. Okay, you start on one end of the animal, eat through, that's the same amount you would get. It's not too much, it's not too little, it's just right. And what's great about it is, for any of you, now most of us were not raised on organ meats. The texture, the flavor, the aroma is different to us. Not necessarily bad or good, it's just different. So finding ways to get it into our diets sometimes is challenging. When you put it in at that percentage, you almost don't even know it's there. And I'm not one for hiding anything in food. It just naturally isn't like in your face. And if you're somebody who's grinding this stuff yourself, I'll give you another trick. Again, the appearance and the texture of organ meats is different than the other parts of the animal. So even sometimes if you're grinding like an ancestral burger, if you have an 8-year-old that is really picky, they'll pick out the little bits of the liver that are in that burger. It's there. I can see it there. I can see it there. So what we do here is this. In most cases, we take the organs, and instead of grinding it with the meat and the fat, we throw it in the Vitamix and just puree it. And then if you puree it, you literally are getting rid of the different texture and the different color. Then mix that in with your ground beef or ground, whatever it's beef or whatever, meat and fat, mix that in and make your patties or meatballs or whatever it is you're doing. And you're not going to be able to pick out those little pieces. Yeah.
No, I love that. And that speaks to what you were talking about earlier, getting closer to your food source and understanding, because I grew up hunting with my dad and my family. We have some acreage here in Pennsylvania, and that's something I grew up on. So I understand getting closer to your food source. And growing up, because it's what my family did, the guys in my family, my dad, we got rid of what you were saying, 50% of the animal. But once I started learning, when I read Deep Nutrition and some of these other more primal books, as well as yours, I was like, I got to start keeping the organs from this deer. And I started keeping everything for the most part. And I think if we can just get a little bit closer to our food source, whether that's going to a farmer's market or if it's hunting or growing a garden, something like that, I think we will really start to understand nutrition differently, and we will start to see it as you're describing it here in your book, Eat Like a Human. There's one more question I wanted to ask you before I let you go, and that's in regards to dairy. And because there's a big movement right now with raw dairy, and you lay this out so perfectly in your book. Is dairy from other animals a food for humans? Is raw dairy okay to eat? And what should we think about this conversation about dairy in general?
I love that you asked me this. So I'm very passionate about dairy for a lot of reasons. I do think dairy is a foundational food for human. Human milk is a foundational food for baby humans, without a doubt. And then once we get lean, like I mentioned earlier, we're out here defenseless. And what we need to do is to get any raw material into our body in a safe and nourishing way is use some sort of a technology to replicate something that another animal does naturally to transform it into its safe and most nourishing form, do that to it, and then consume it. I mean, that's literally the basis for literally everything that I eat. Yeah. And I'm confident it was the basis of our ancestral diets producing us as modern day humans. So it's foundational to me. I gave you the example with tough vegetable materials and the cow and the rumen and all that. And there's a ton of different examples that I could give. But as far as dairy is concerned, when we, as modern day adult humans, a couple things we have to realize. First off, every mammal, when they're weaned from their mothers, becomes lactose intolerant. Every mammal. Now, I know some people are saying, "Oh, I love my cat." Again, like your cat is actually lactose intolerant. Okay. I'm sorry, it's true. They can deal with it a little better than lactose intolerant humans can, but they're lactose intolerant essentially. I used to think, when I didn't understand what lactose intolerance really was and how it occurred in humans, I used to think, because I'm not lactose intolerant, I used to think that lactose intolerance in humans was a very weird thing. And the few people that I knew that were lactose intolerant, I'm like, oh, they're the outliers. And it's the exact opposite. 60 to 70% of modern humans right now, currently today, are lactose intolerant. There's only 30 to 40% of us that are actually lactose tolerant as adult humans. And it is and we can, all of us that are lactose tolerant can trace some of our heritage back to a few key locations in either Europe or Africa where there were independent genetic mutations thousands of years ago that allowed the production of lactase, that enzyme that breaks down the sugar lactose, into adulthood in humans. So it's actually a weird thing to be lactose tolerant. It's a more normal thing, not only as far as humans are concerned, but all mammals are concerned, to be lactose intolerant. So there are a lot of people that use something like that as evidence to say, hey, humans become lactose intolerant and we don't have these enzymes and we don't produce lipase and the other things that we need as adults. So that means, therefore, we should drink milk.
That's a good point.
And to me, that is an incredibly silly way to talk about food.
Yeah.
Because we can't eat almost everything that we eat without help. The question isn't what should we eat, it's how should we eat. The question isn't should we drink milk. The question is how can we, in the safest, most nourishing way possible, consume dairy from other animals. And like I mentioned earlier, in most cases we say, hey, if I'm going to approach this food, what biologically does a cow do, and how do I replicate that on a countertop in my kitchen? Or what does a duck do with grains, and I can replicate that when I make sourdough bread.
And to interrupt quickly, in a world of food scarcity, like I mentioned, I think that would have been so genius of humans to be able to utilize that dairy from another species like the Samburu tribe, to be able to access those calories. That meant they could survive and thrive and gain nutrition from that. So logically thinking from an ancestral perspective, it would only make sense that humans were able to find ways to extract nutrition from dairy throughout adulthood.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the key. When it comes to dairy, So all other foods, we look at, okay, this animal does this, we can replicate it this way. This happened, we can replicate it this way. When it comes to dairy, all we have to do, we don't look at other animals. All we have to do is look at ourselves from when we were infants. How were we wired? What did we biologically do and possess as human infants, perfectly designed to consume dairy? What did we do inside of our bodies to take that milk from our mothers and turn it into something that is as safe and nourishing as it can be for our own cells inside of our bodies and actually nourish ourselves as baby humans? And the answer is we fermented it inside of our bodies. I mean, we literally, baby mammals make cheese inside of their bodies from their mother's milk when they're drinking it. And that is literally, and it's a much longer conversation than we have time for now, but that's what we do. So I am a huge raw milk advocate. Good raw milk is one of the best things on the planet.
Yeah.
But good raw fermented milk is even better. So dairy that has been high quality raw dairy that's been turned into yogurt, kefir, traditional cheeses, clabber, any of those things is 1,000 times better than just the raw milk alone for an adult human, because that process of turning that raw milk into those products is replicating the same thing that we did inside of our stomachs as infant humans that we know many of us can no longer, actually we cannot do any longer. So, I'll say two things. So I am a huge raw milk advocate. We have been drinking milk from other animals for at least 8,000 years. Consuming milk, not drinking milk. Other than the Samburu and the Maasai, which we talked about earlier at the beginning of this podcast, I don't know of any traditional group around the world that doesn't ferment their dairy. It's all fermented ahead of time. And if you are lactose intolerant, the fermentation process, the bacteria actually eat the lactose. It's their food. And the final product is either very low in lactose or is lactose free. So that is why if you're lactose intolerant, you can do well on really good yogurts or hard cheeses that have been aged for a while, because all the lactose is already gone. And it's very important. I think it's amazing food.
I've been making my own kefir, however you want to say it, for almost 2 years at this point. I go to my local farm right here in Pennsylvania, and it's super legal to get raw milk here. And I get a couple gallons of raw milk, which is $9 a gallon, which is actually pretty cost effective compared to most places. And I just come back and I ferment it. It takes 24 hours to ferment into kefir. And as you're describing, I mean, it ferments off a lot of the lactose, if not all of it. So people that are lactose intolerant can tolerate this, but the science, the literature on fermented dairy is incredible. I mean, randomized controlled trial after randomized controlled trial shows the benefits of digestive issues, of skin issues. The list goes on. And in a way, correct me if I'm wrong, but is fermented dairy one, because we think about pasteurizing raw dairy, and we can get into that in a moment. People will say, don't consume raw dairy. It's dangerous. It's not safe. Consume pasteurized dairy because it's much safer. Cultures have been consuming fermented dairy for a very long time, as you described. Is fermented dairy a way of making that food safer from pathogenic bacteria, potentially just as safe as pasteurized dairy, but it's basically the complete opposite? It's a fully living food with probiotics, whereas pasteurized dairy is, I mean, it's not really dairy anymore, right? I mean, you're just taking away all the living aspects of it. Is that a fair statement to say?
Yes. I want to say this at the beginning of this, though, and be very, very clear. Good raw milk is an amazing resource. Bad raw milk is still bad raw milk. And we're caught up in this cycle of raw versus pasteurized milk that we're not having the conversations that we really need in order to figure out, let's talk about the raw milk then. So yes, the milk has been raw for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, up until very, very recent modern times. And I will also I talk about this a little bit in the book as well. I'll be very honest that there were reasons when we started pasteurizing that it was one of the answers we could have gone to. The dairy industry was so incredibly horrid when we started pasteurizing.
Swirl dairies and all that.
Swirl dairies. It was just so bad that to take the dairies that we had and the practices that they were engaged in and transform it into something that could produce safe raw milk was not achievable at the time. And the answer was instead, let's just boil the milk and kill everything off. pasteurizing doesn't make bad milk good. It just makes bad milk not lethal. Right? It's still bad milk. It's just not lethal. It's not going to kill you or make you sick, but it's not going to nourish you either, right? At least the same level that raw milk could. So the reason I bring that up is because some states, raw milk is legal. Some states, raw milk is illegal. Some states have loopholes you can go through. And the states that have the loopholes, like here in Maryland, the loophole is you can get pet milk. You can get raw milk as pet milk here in Maryland. The problem, and I do not want anybody telling me what I can or can't eat, have oversight over my food. I don't want that at all. I hope one day we can get to that place. I hope we can get to it in my lifetime. But it also comes, that lack of oversight also comes with the requirement for the responsibility of the consumer. Like, you can't automatically then say, okay, I heard all this stuff online now about raw milk. Maybe it's good for me. And I'm in a state where there's no regulations over raw milk, as, say, pet food, and then all of a sudden just start ordering pet food or going to some shop or pet milk, and just going to some shop and buying pet milk without having gone to the farm.
Yeah, right.
Like, that raw milk could be not really good raw milk. Go to the farm, see the farmer, see how they treat the cows, see their process, and then decide. And this is how we've decided how to eat food for millions of years. Then decide for yourself whether what they're engaging in is something that, producing food that you want to be a part of. But just going to the shop and buying milk, that's one of, again, I'm not a fan for all the regulations, but in a place like Pennsylvania, where they have standards for the farmers who are producing the raw milk, is a different situation. What I'm saying.
Have you heard of the Raw Milk Institute?
No.
So my farm that I go to here, I've been drinking raw milk for about 10 years now, close to it, 9 years. And the farm that I go to, the family cow, I don't know if they're the ones that founded the Raw Milk Institute or they were one of the early adopters, but you can go to the rawmilkinstitute.org. What this institute does is they teach farms how, it's completely free. They teach farms how to set up sanitary conditions, how to bottle your milk, and then also on-site testing. And that's something that makes my farm very unique in the fact is that by law, pasteurized milk, from my understanding, pasteurized milk in the grocery store can have up to 10 coliform CFUs per milliliter and up to 100,000 SPC, which is standard plate count, CFUs per milliliter. So by law, I mean, all this pasteurized milk can have some bacteria in it. My farm, they do on-site testing every single week, and they post this to the website, the rawmilkinstitute.org. They have some weeks it's 0 coliform CFUs per milliliter, and they hold themselves to a higher standard, under 5,000, not 100,000, under 5,000 SPCs CFU per milliliter. So in some ways, that raw milk is 10 times safer than the pasteurized milk in the grocery store. And I think that should be one of the standards of raw milk, and just going to your farm, seeing the conditions, seeing how sanitary it is. And I love that my farm does that because you can see pictures and videos online of how they do it, all their testing. And I just think that's a great way. And people will still say it's not safe, it's not pasteurized. But again, humans have been consuming raw dairy for 10,000-ish years. It wouldn't have gotten passed down this many years if it wasn't safe, or we found a way to prepare it, ferment it to make it safer.
And you're absolutely right. And I want to just finish the question you originally asked about the fermentation piece. When you ferment, so if we look at a pH scale, right, 0 to 14, 7 is neutral in the middle. When the number goes down from 7, it becomes more acidic, and when it goes higher from 7, it becomes more alkaline or basic. 7, which is neutral, like water, is very amenable. It's safe for all kinds of good things and bad things, right? All sorts of crazy stuff can live in that neutral area. It's why you don't want to go swimming in a farm pond in the middle of August, right? The bacterial load is going to be off the charts. But when you start going in either direction, you can actually, depending on the type of fermentation, you can ferment to make things more acidic or ferment to make things more alkaline. You go through a zone of incredible safety for humans. Like when you get into this zone, only the good things that can nourish our bodies can live there, like the good bacteria that, populate our guts, and the pathogenic things can't survive or have a very difficult time depending on what kind of pathogen it is. So in most of the fermentations we're talking about, sourdough bread, fermented and cured meat, like a salami, cheese, sauerkraut, we're talking about the lactobacillus bacteria eating the available sugars, creating lactic acid, and the pH is dropping. When you start getting into the low 5s and into the 4s, you're in that amazing zone of safety. And as an example, for mozzarella cheese will stretch at 5.2. Cheddar cheese is salted at 5.2, and then the pH continues to drop as it ages lower. So just by yogurt gets into the low 4s in most cases. So you're talking about taking something that milk starts at about 6.9, 6.8 pH, and all kinds of things can live in it level. And as you are fermenting it and creating lactic acid and the pH is dropping, you're getting into one of these very, very, very safe zones. I would hesitate to say, and again, there's a difference between creating things that are safe and not lethal and nourishing. They're all different. They're all different things. I don't want to suggest that you could take really poor quality, dangerous raw milk and ferment it into safety. I don't actually know that answer. Mm-hmm. At the same way that you could take that same milk and pasteurize it and just kill all the pathogens off, right? So from a safety, non-lethal perspective, I don't know the data on that. But I can tell you that you take raw milk, high quality, amazing raw milk, and ferment it, it will improve in safety, it will improve in bioavailability, it will improve in nutrition, and we love these things that are fermented. It improves in the flavor and the texture and the aroma. I mean, like, one of my favorite things on the planet is amazing cheese. And I like amazing cheese better than a glass of raw milk, and so does my body.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. We covered a lot of ground today, and I appreciate you being here. Could you leave us with maybe just a couple takeaways from this conversation that people can maybe just get started with, how to prepare their food better and start thinking differently about their food preparation? Any couple of takeaways that you could leave the audience with?
Absolutely. So first off, thank you so much for the time and the opportunity to talk to your audience. I love what you're doing, and I love being a part of it. So really, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. The number one thing you can do is remove links from your food chain, whatever way possible. And if you really think about it, and I know this sounds sort of pie in the sky, kumbaya, hug a tree sort of thing, but the reality is it's incredibly important. It is, if you're of that mindset that you want to do things that are ancestrally appropriate, this is ancestrally appropriate. Most of us do not know anybody in our food chain. And if maybe it's the cashier at the grocery store, and they're even getting rid of cashiers now at the grocery store. Or, we go to the farmer's market and buy our arugula from the farmer, and we think we've taken this huge... No, I mean, seriously, remove links from your food chain. And it can be a very, very small step, but that same step implemented day after day, month after month, year after year, can make a dramatic difference in your and your family's health. That's number one. So ways of doing this, like I mentioned earlier, go hunting with somebody, go fishing with somebody, go foraging with somebody, or be a part of a butchering. There's so many farmers now that are, they're butchering they can't, in many cases, can't legally butcher for the public as far as consumption is concerned, but they will butcher for themselves. And so if you don't have access to wild animals for hunting or something like this, go to a farmer and be there when they're butchering something. If they're good at it, it is actually a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch. Take a butchering class. We do a lot of butchering classes here, and I will tell you what's fascinating is we start with half pigs on the counter, break them down completely and turn them into everything. The classes over the years have gone from 100%, 40-year-old males to all sorts of different ages, and now a lot of them are getting dominated by females in the class, and it's a beautiful thing. People are embracing it. So number one, find a way to take a link out of your food chain. Secondly, make sure, and I know I'm beating a dead horse with this one, but or a broken record or whatever, get rid of all the industrial aniseed oils in your house, please. It is so incredibly important. And if you're going to use any plant-based fats, coconut oil, an avocado oil, an extra virgin olive oil are ones that we use here for cold things. We really don't cook with them. We use them for cold applications. But start to embrace high-quality animal fats again. Butter, ghee, lard, tallow, schmaltz, bacon grease, that sort of thing is incredible. And when we started to go down this road and realize the dangers of these nut and seed oils, it was hard. I was like, we're not throwing away food. Like, we'll just use up what's in the cupboard. And I kept saying, no, we got to throw it out. We got to throw it out. And then finally, it was one of these mindset changes that allowed us to actually throw them out. I looked at her one day and I said, you know what? What if we looked at that and realized that it's not food? We're not throwing food away. If it's not food, maybe it's a different thing. And it was. In our minds, okay, great. Now it's not food. This is something that could actually make us very, very sick. We're going to throw it out. And even some of that was, we put some of it in the garage. We use it for like on wood and things. So we got it out of the cupboard at least. So really like for your food chain, get rid of all the industrial nut and seed oils. And then, and this one is as well, get rid of all your refined sugars. Now, if I am of the mindset that we need zero sugar in our diet whatsoever from a nutritional perspective, but I also recognize that there are a lot of cultural and emotional reasons for sugar. And for true, genuine health as a human, we need to meet all of our needs at the same time. So for some of that, it might mean a little bit of something sweet at some time. What we've landed on here at the restaurant at home, and it's helped a lot, is instead of have a zero sugar policy, what we've landed on is a zero refined sugar policy. So we will sweeten with honey, we will sweeten with maple syrup, and we will sweeten with unrefined sugar. A good example is muscovado. It is literally, you press the cane juice out of the sugar cane and let it evaporate. And there's several reasons why this is the case. Number one, there are some micronutrients in unrefined sweeteners that you can make the argument are beneficial. Now, it doesn't discount the other issue with the simple carbs coming into our diet, but there are minerals, there are enzymes, there are a lot of things coming that we're ingesting at the same time. So number one, my take is, if we're going to eat something sweet, you might as well get all the benefit of what would be coming with that sweetener at the same time. Secondly, the flavors are incredible. I mean, refined white sugar is just sweet. Muscovado sugar is incredibly complex. Honey and real maple syrup is incredibly complex. So there's a heightened level of flavor that comes in with it at the same time. And thirdly, and this is just as important, good versions of this are incredibly expensive. And in a world where all of the economics of our food have been so screwed up with all sorts of things in the food system, it is too easy for us to get these. So if we say, listen, I'm just going to use zero, there's no refined sweeteners, and you are forced to buy the more expensive ones, you're going to use less of it by default. And the final piece, and it's just as important, is because they're less refined, there's less steps in the process, which means there are less people and entities involved with that food chain. So number one, you're taking links out of your food chain by already consuming and purchasing these unrefined sweeteners. But from a larger human perspective, the people that are doing the hard work, right? The people that are harvesting the honey or pressing the sugarcane juice or harvesting the maple syrup, if you're buying these things from a less or unrefined version, the money that you're spending, more of that is actually going into the pockets of the people doing the hard work. I mean, if you buy Domino's sugar from the grocery store, the people that get most of that percentage of your money is Domino, right? Big company. The people that are actually out in the field cutting the cane and, the villages that are out doing that, those people are not getting a smallest percentage of money from your pocket. But by going closer to the source, that also means the people that are doing the hard work and doing the good work are actually getting more of your money.
Oh, those are all perfect tips. I love that. And that's how I'm striving to live more of my life personally, get as close to my food source as possible. I really love that. Can you let everyone know where they can find you and find your restaurant and a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So right now, and if you ask me this in a few weeks, there'll be a couple things changed, but they can still find us this way. We're in the middle of rebranding and consolidating our websites. So the sources I'm going to give you now will still be live then too, and hoping that you'll get to see all this very, very soon. But our restaurant is called the Modern Stone Age Kitchen. It's in Chestertown, Maryland, here on the Eastern Shore. We have a very a strict list of policies of things we do and never do with we'll always do and never do with our food. A little bit longer than we have time to go into here, but I can promise you everything that we talked about on this podcast, everything that I wrote about in the book are actually implemented in the production of the food here. And we're only about a little over an hour from Philadelphia, about an hour from DC, and a few hours from New York City. So please come and visit us. And you can find us information about the kitchen on our website at modernstoneagekitchen.com and see us on social media at Modern Stone Age Kitchen. Things like our blog posts, any of the research that we're doing, our nonprofit, the Eastern Shore Food Lab, all of our classes, both online and in person, all of that kind of information lives currently at eatlikeahuman.com. And you can follow me on social media at Dr. Bill Schindler, at Dr. Bill Schindler.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Guys, I cannot recommend his book, Dr. Bill Schindler's book, Eat Like a Human. Like I mentioned earlier, this book has been one of the top 4 books that that has been so influential in my life, that has changed my wife and I, how we look at food, how we source our food, how we prepare our food and cook our food, and how I've thought about nutrition. I know it can help so many people. So definitely check out Eat Like a Human. And Dr. Bill Schindler, I appreciate you joining me today.
Craig, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.